was about the dogs. Nah, it's about power. Yeah. Put up to the specialty, sunrise on the ground. Dogs in the grooming tents, whispers all around. Catalog smiles with the tension in the air. Every handshake got a hidden little snare. Bored in the back room, running quiet little schemes. Bylaws in the pocket like a stack of poker dreams. Say it's for the breed, but they guarding their throne. If you question anything, they coming for your bone. Grievance in the envelope, certified mail. Club justice system, but the day.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch. See, I just seen your message. Tired, just woke up. 1:30 in the afternoon. Oh my gosh, there's literally a show called The Dark Story of America's most exclusive psychiatric hospital, McLean Hospital.
Rolling lawns, tall oaks, red brick cottages nestled among the trees. The air is clean. The grounds are immaculate. There is a quiet here that feels almost designed, because it was. This is Belmont, Massachusetts, and what you are looking at is not a university. Behind these iron gates, tucked into 107 acres of carefully arranged beauty, sits McLean Hospital. For over 2 centuries, the most exclusive psychiatric institution in America. A place so elegant, so deliberately serene, that generations of patients arrived not knowing quite what it was. A retreat, perhaps, a rest cure, a temporary arrangement. That was often the idea. Because McLean was not only a place where people came to heal, it was a place where people were quietly made to disappear. Not by enemies, not by the government, but by their own families, the very people who signed the admission papers with steady hands, and drove home in silence, relieved. Behind these gates, a poet would write some of the most searing verses in the English language, in between rounds of electroshock therapy. A legendary musician would sit at an upright piano in a grand brick hall, playing for patients whose families had paid to never see them again. A landscape architect would arrive at the end of his life, look around at the place he had helped bring into existence, and realize no one had listened to a word he said. And the old money dynasties of Boston, the Brahmins, the heirs, the quietly embarrassed, would discover that McLean's gates were the most discreet solution that money could buy. This is the story of America's golden cage, and it begins with a question that has no comfortable answer. What does it mean when the people who lock you away are the same ones who say they love you? Chapter 1: Born from Chains. Before there was McLean, there was something far darker. In early America, the mentally ill were not treated. They were managed, hidden, and contained. If a family could afford to keep their troubled relative behind closed doors, that was considered a mercy. If they could not, the options were grimmer still. The local jail, the almshouse, the workhouse. Institutions that made no distinction between the criminal, the destitute, and the simply broken-minded. They were housed together in the same filth, under the same indifference, because the prevailing wisdom held that madness was not an illness. It was a failure, something to be locked away from polite society and forgotten. Across the Atlantic, the picture was no better, and in some cases, considerably worse. At Paris's notorious Bicêtre Asylum, inmates were loaded down with chains, shackled to floors and walls, at the mercy of attendants armed with whips, and the authority to use them freely. In certain German institutions, patients were lowered into dungeons filled with snakes, the theory being that extreme terror might jolt the mind back to reason. England's King, George III, during one of his episodes of mental illness, was bound in a straitjacket and physically restrained by his own attendants. A king, treated no better than a prisoner. If royalty could be treated this way, one can only imagine what awaited those with no name and no title. Then, in 1792, something
Is that true? I've never been on a cruise. Is that seriously true? Or are you just fucking with me again? Oh, I gotta see. Oh, yeah. No, being pretty serious. I mean, that's true, I guess. Yeah. I've never been on a cruise. Cruises freak me out. But yeah, I guess that would be true. I mean,
shifted. A French physician named Philippe Pinel took charge of the Bicêtre and did something that scandalized his colleagues and changed the history of psychiatry. He ordered the removal of the chains and championed the humane philosophy that would spread across the Western world. He proposed that the mentally ill were not monsters to be subdued, but human beings in distress, and that a calm environment, structured routine, and basic human dignity might do more for them than any restraint or punishment ever had. Around the same time, in England, a Quaker named William Tuke established the York Retreat on similar principles. Together, they gave the world a new idea: moral treatment, the belief that the mind, like the body, could heal, if given the right conditions. That idea crossed the Atlantic slowly. In 1811, the Massachusetts legislature granted a charter to the Massachusetts General Hospital Corporation, organized in part by Reverend John Bartlett, chaplain of the Boston Almshouse, who had seen firsthand what happened to the mentally ill when no one cared for them. From the very beginning, the founders intended a separate facility, one dedicated entirely to the treatment of mental illness, built not on punishment, but on Penal's principles. 7 years later, in 1818, the asylum opened on the former Barrel Estate in Charlestown, the mansion adapted by the renowned architect Charles Bulfinch into a place of treatment rather than a place of confinement. It was the first psychiatric hospital in New England, and only the fourth in the entire country. Its first superintendent, Dr. Rufus Wyman, carried the philosophy of moral treatment into every aspect of the institution's early life. Patients arrived from all walks, the poor, the middling, the moderately wealthy, all admitted, all treated, all living under the same roof in what was, for that brief moment, something genuinely radical. A place that believed every broken mind deserved care. That moment did not last long. By 1823, the asylum was in financial crisis, carrying a debt that threatened to end the experiment entirely. Then came the bequest. A Boston merchant named John McLean, upon his death, left $25,000 to the asylum, with a residual legacy that would eventually total nearly $120,000, payable upon his widow's passing. It was an extraordinary sum. It saved the institution, and it changed it permanently. With the money came a new name, the McLean Asylum for the Insane, and with the name came something subtler and more consequential, a new identity. Wealthy donors expect a certain kind of return on a certain kind of investment. Other public institutions were opening to serve those who could not afford McLean's particular kind of mercy. McLean no longer needed to serve everyone. It could afford to be selective, and selective it became. What had begun as a democratic act of compassion, a place for all the broken minds of Massachusetts, began its long, quiet drift towards serving only those who could pay. The chains were gone, the whips were gone. In their place, sitting rooms, servants, manicured grounds, and a gate that, depending on who you were, either kept the world out or kept you in. Chapter 2: The Campus of Beautiful Lies. By the 1840s, the pastoral dream was already dying. The Charlestown campus that had once felt like a sanctuary, open fields, clean air, the gentle remove of the countryside, was being swallowed alive. Boston was expanding, and it was not expanding gracefully. Factories crept closer, slaughterhouses rose on adjacent land. And then came the railroads. By 1872, 2 sets of tracks cut directly through the McLean grounds, shattering whatever remained of the therapeutic quiet that moral treatment demanded. The asylum that had been designed as a refuge from the chaos of modern life.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we refer back to the matter of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, excluding the jury.
All right, Counsel, you ready for the jury? Hi.
Back when, but I mean, like, she went there now, but that's how it all started. Well, yeah, AI is meant to, I truly believe that AI is meant to be like, you can just keep, well, it's built by people. So the more information that people put into it, the more that it learns, right? So you could put in, it's no different than Wikipedia. You can change Wikipedia. So the more information you put in, the more it learns. And so you can change it. And also, I believe meant to feed you what you want to hear. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's only going to get as smart as what people user.
Your Honor, for the purpose of the record, we return back to the trial of Commonwealth versus Lindsay Clancy. All parties are present, including the defendant and including the 18 jurors.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, members of the jury. We're going to now return to the Commonwealth's presentation. Ms. Sprague?
Thank you, Your Honor. Commonwealth calls Joshua McKelanigan.
afternoon, sir. Please stop right here, raise your right hand for the clerk, please.
Good afternoon. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony and the evidence you shall give to the court and the jury will not melt any Commonwealth by the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Watch your step, please.
All right, good afternoon, sir. Please pray.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Joshua McKelanigan, McKelligan.
Where do you work?
Massachusetts State Police,
How long have you been with the state police?
since December 2013.
In January of 2023, where were you assigned?
To the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office.
And what was your role there?
I was a trooper assigned to the homicide and major crime section.
And could you tell us within that unit what the role of a case officer is?
Case officer is assigned cases as they come in, and the case officer then is the point of contact for the district attorney's office, the state police, other agencies.
And as a case officer for a homicide, for example, when you respond to a scene and you're doing the investigation as time progresses, is the case officer doing every part of the investigation?
No.
What is the role of a case officer in terms of managing or collecting information?
Is to try to keep track of what's been going on with the investigation.
And so within the State Police Detective Unit at the Plymouth County DA's office, there are a group of troopers that work there, correct?
Yes.
And do you work as a team on any homicide investigations you're working on?
Yes.
And the case officer, is it their role to collect information and evidence from the other troopers as they gather it?
Yes.
How
So
should
you have a supervisor when you are the case officer?
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to January 24th, 2023. Did you learn that day of an incident that had happened at 47 Summer Street in Duxbury?
I did.
What time did you learn about that approximately?
About 6:45 p.m.
PM? And how did you learn that information?
The duty lieutenant in the state police headquarters in Middleborough called me.
Once you had that information, what did you do?
I called my supervisor and then responded to Duxbury.
And where in Duxbury did you respond?
I went to Duxbury Police Station.
And at that point in time, did you know that you were going to be the case officer for this case?
Not when I responded, but at the police station, I was informed I was going to be.
And at some point in time, did you go to 47 Summer Street in Duxbury?
I did.
And when was that?
After I got a search warrant, I went to the house. It was probably, I think, around early morning, between 3 and 4, sometime like that.
Between 3 and 4 a.m.?
Yes.
So it'd be the early morning hours of January 25th, 2023?
Yes.
And did you take part in the search of the home?
I did not.
What was your role there at the home that night or in the early morning hours?
I just went to observe the house, just to see what the scene in the house looked like.
So other officers were conducting the search?
Yes.
At the scene, did you eventually walk through the house?
Yes.
And was that before or after the search was executed?
After the search.
At some point in time, did you go into the master bedroom on the second floor?
Yes.
And what did you observe in that room?
Oh, no.
I remember a tent style, like covering a crib, I believe. There was a mirror in front of me. To the left, there was the bed. And then I remember blood on the floor.
But did you rush the
you
door?
said to the left, but pointed with your right arm?
No, it's my left hand.
Your left, okay.
Yes.
All right. So you go into the bedroom, and what do you see anything on the floor, on the walls, the bedding, anything?
Yes, just going off of memory, I remember there was blood on the floor, and the mirror was kind of like straight ahead from the entrance of the door.
Okay. And was a video taken of the house that included that room in particular?
Yes.
I'd like to move to submit the scene video.
I know this was 3 years ago, so think about it. He's like remembering it. How's your job search going?
And if we could play the portion of the video for the master bedroom.
You know, defense is going to ask him about that damn drawer. You didn't see this drawer? You didn't get it? You didn't get her Apple Watch? Why did she jump out that window? I just have to move the bed to jump out that window. Yeah. See, that's the weird thing. Like, there's nothing here but the mirror. Would have been easier for her to jump out that window, right? Like, instead of moving the whole bed to get behind this window. Right. Yeah, that's what the blood splatter analysis said. You see, there's going to be a window right here. Right?
Thank you. Sir, when you went into the master bedroom, did you see blood sprayed all over the walls and everywhere?
No.
No.
And fair to say that the video shows all of the walls in the bedroom and doesn't show any spatter or anything on the walls?
Yes.
Did you also go outside into the backyard and look at the exterior of the home?
Yes.
We could have the photos, please.
I think it looks like she stood in front of the mirror.
Zoom in on the top window.
Yeah, it looked like she just stood in front of the mirror, like,
Photo shows the condition.
and just let it drip.
The upstairs window, the second floor window that leads to the master bedroom.
Yes.
And the screen there in the video, is that how it was when you saw it that night?
Yes.
Pushed up.
Yes.
And if you could see the next photo.
And I still want to say that that's
Actually, we can go back.
her hanging on
Zoom in the
or
middle
shimming
there,
over
between
because
the
she's
two
seen the
windows.
window well. Because here it's
Areas
dripping.
of red brown stains on the exterior of the house. Did you observe
Mhm.
those that night on in the early morning hours of January 25th, 2023?
Yes.
And then the third photo, please. We could zoom in on the.
That's where she hit.
Would this be, this third photo, would this be the first
Yeah,
floor
come
window
down
below
this
the
window.
master bedroom window?
Yes.
And these red brown stains on the shingles and then on the window ledge there. Were those there in the early morning hours of January 25th, 2023?
Yes.
Could we have these three photos marked as the next exhibit on the disc?
Any objection? They may be admitted.
Yeah.
Exhibit 265.
Well, this morning.
Now,
somebody-
as the investigation proceeded, did you learn, or did other officers learn from Patrick Clancy that the defendant was on some psychiatric medication?
Yes.
And was that information relayed to you in terms of preparing the search warrant?
Yes.
And is that why you included prescription medication in the search warrant?
Yes.
At that point in time, did you or any of the other officers know that the defendant had crushed up pills and taken them that night?
No.
But I don't think she did. They weren't high enough.
At some point in time, did Patrick Clancy bring pill bottles to the state police and turn them over?
Yes, he did.
And where did he say those were from?
In the center console of his truck, not the top section, the section underneath it.
Weird.
Did he tell you at some point that pills had been found in the nightstand drawer?
Yes, he did.
And that was in the master bedroom?
Yes.
And did he tell you who he found those with?
Yes, he did.
And who was that?
His attorney?
And did he tell you why he gave those pills?
Objection, I believe it was me, and I'm not his attorney.
Attorney-compliant privilege now?
That's what,
Asking everybody.
why don't you re-ask that, what it was that Patrick Clancy said?
What was it that Patrick Clancy said? Did he give you a name or just say my attorney?
He said Kevin Reddington.
And did he tell you why he gave the pills to Attorney Reddington instead of giving them to you like he gave the other pills?
No, he did not.
He never attempted to turn those pills into the state police or those bottles into the state police. Is that correct?
Correct.
At some point in time, did you learn that the Clancy family had gone to the Museum of Science on January 8th, 2023?
Yes.
And was a video obtained?
Yes.
Did you watch that video?
Yes.
Did you observe the family, including the defendant, interacting with each other and the defendant specifically interacting with the children and exhibits at the museum?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, Exhibit 14, I'd asked to play just a small portion of that. It has not been played previously.
Anyway, this morning they played where somebody on the
We
laptop
could pause here for just a moment.
looked up
Do you see the
suicide,
family
jumping off a
footage?
balcony, roof, bridge,
Yes.
or out a window.
And if you could just get up and point to them with the court commission.
Sure.
In November or somewhere. So then she does. Defense is trying to say it was Patrick.
And at this point in time in the video, are we
What
seeing
happened
Patrick
with-
Clancy take Dawson Clancy out of that room, leaving Lindsay Clancy with Callan and Cora?
Yes.
Is that Cora there in the red skirt?
Yes.
Now, at this point in the video, at approximately 11:58 and 30 seconds, what is happening in the video footage now?
Corey's beginning to play with the exhibit. Patrick's standing off by himself. Lindsay Clancy is with Callan, and Dawson is watching.
Could you just point out where Patrick and Dawson are? For the record, you've pointed to Patrick towards the top of the screen and Dawson near the entrance to the exhibit.
Yes. Yes.
And throughout this video, in this portion of the video, can the defendant be seen instructing the children, pointing to them, showing them how to work the exhibit and operating some type of control panel?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like, why he was standing over here.
And at some point, does this switch and the defendant helps Dawson with the same exhibit?
Yes.
And that goes on for several minutes
Yes, I believe so.
and showing
Yeah.
that we've gone forward to approximately noon in the video timer. Thank you. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sir, during the grand jury process, did you attend a meeting with the medical examiner in this case?
Make it
Yes.
ice.
And did you participate in interviewing her, specifically Dr. Barbara Vadal-Olsen?
Yes.
And did you participate in interviewing her, specifically the portion of her proposed testimony where she was explaining how someone dies from strangulation?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that at some point in time, she was asked,
Objection.
Counsel Sidebar.
Medical HIPAA privilege. I don't doubt that she was overwhelmed. I've been saying that since the beginning. She was definitely overwhelmed. I think he was definitely not a part. He was so disassociated from his own life. He didn't know anything. Again, still doesn't give you a right to kill your children.
sir, in that meeting with the medical examiner, did she tell you that constant pressure would need to be applied even after the person went unconscious in a strangulation in order to affect death?
Yes.
Did she tell you that it takes several minutes of continuous pressure to cause
Can we
death?
not have leading questions? If this is going to be admitted, can we not have leading questions? Sir, witness.
You want to ask?
What?
Ask him what she said. And then
Do you recall? Sorry.
go ahead.
Do you recall what she said about
He doesn't want-
the time it
Don't want
takes
to keep
to strangle someone to death?
After unconsciousness, I think she said several minutes. It would take several more minutes for someone to die.
And would that be several more minutes of strangulation?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Ms. Ray.
So she asked you about the pills that
Yep.
were located in the master bedroom by Patrick when I was with him, right?
Yes.
And you know that Patrick indicated that after you guys had cleared the scene, finished with your investigation, seized all the pill bottles that you were able to locate, that I went in the house with him and I took a number of items, photographs, albums, things on the wall and stuff like that, right?
It's all mine.
All I know is the pill bottles. I don't know what else you took.
Oh, it's the pill bottles. And at some point,
The Apple Watch.
I must have shown you this, recognize this as being the nightstand bra.
It looks
Right.
similar to the one that was in the video.
See it? You look at it?
I mean, it looks similar to the one. I've never seen that. I don't know.
So these would be the bottles that were in there, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. And do you know that when these were seized, the first thing that was done is I contacted the DA's office and said that I had them?
I don't know what you said to them.
If you want to come by my office and pick up anything they had, you're welcome to look at it, seize it, have it analyzed, send it to a crime lab. I didn't care.
I don't know what you said.
So, yeah. Thank you.
All right. He redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. sir. Thank you.
He's over. He does the dumbest
What
thing.
else could I see it?
They're gonna end it already. Half hour in, they're gonna end it already. Right? He is gonna marry that drawer. So there's no trial tomorrow. They're not coming to trial tomorrow. It'll be Monday, 9:30 a.m. He said he was gonna let him go early. I don't know why he came back for this witness. He should have just had him come Monday if he's only gonna do it for one witness for a half hour. It's crazy. Right, exactly. This guy's off the chain. And he's trying to prejudice the jury so bad. I don't understand how he, like, just standing up saying random shit.
I told you we might break a little bit early today, and finally, again, I was right. And so we're going to recess on this matter for you.
Wow.
So I'm going to excuse you Monday morning, all right? So you don't have to come in here tomorrow. So I'm going to suggest that take these next couple of days, rest up. I know it's been a long couple of weeks for you. I appreciate all the work that you've done. I'm going to really remind you.
And that's what he's trying to do too.
Now I've got kind of a longer stretch that you're going to be at home. You're going to be talking to people. So I just want to remind you, do not talk about this case with anyone. Don't do any research about this case or similar cases. If you have any questions, don't do any research. Don't try and educate yourself on any of the issues or facts that you've heard so far in this case. Don't make any little road trips to go by any places or try and fill in any gaps. The other thing I want to remind you, you have to still keep an open mind.
No.
Right? It was probably easy to kind of nod and say yes when I said that at the very beginning of the case. But now you've heard a lot of evidence, but you haven't heard all the evidence.
Bawled her eyes out in court.
You haven't heard the closing arguments of the attorneys. You haven't heard the law that you do apply. So I'm just reminding you have to do that. It's so important. And so I just kind of want to remind you on that. I want to thank you so much for so far all the work that you've done and all the work that you're going to do. And so I hope you have a very nice weekend. And we will see you on Monday. Just in case you're wondering, we're still well on track. But we'll see you on Monday. We'll continue with the trial at that point. And again, have a nice weekend. All right, thank you.
Court, all rise. Good. Are you closing the office? This way, please.
She looks perplexed again.
All right. Let me see counsel again over to sidebar.
Oh my God.
Had become an island in the middle of it. Something had to be done. The trustees turned to two men. The first was Joseph Curtis, a local civil engineer who would eventually be hired to supervise the actual design and construction of whatever came next. The second was a consultant of considerably greater fame, Frederick Law Olmsted, the landscape architect who had given New York its Central Park and Boston.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth is asking the court to allow the Commonwealth and the defense to have copies of a log that we were advised that, or we've seen, that the trial court security has for people who go back into the lockup area to visit with or tend to or what have you with the defendant during the course of this trial. Both myself and ADA Sprague have witnessed at several points. Obviously, we know there are medical staff that go back with the defendant, but in addition to medical staff, which are not really the primary thrust of this motion, it's that there have been other individuals that are not counsel that are permitted to go back there. And we're not alleging that that's inappropriate in any way, shape, or form. Clearly, the staff here, the security staff, has followed all appropriate protocols, but we are aware that Dr. Zeisel has been back there. We witnessed a priest being allowed back there the other day. And we are advised that these visitors are kept as a log when they come, when they exit, what days, what times. And the Commonwealth is alleging that that's information that might be necessary for us to effectively cross-examine some of the defense witnesses that are going to be presented. Certainly with Dr. Zeisel, it could pose as a potential bias that he's there, that he's back there. He's being presented as an expert witness on the concept of criminal responsibility, and there are certain ethical rules that forensic psychiatrists and psychologists follow that he might be subject to cross-examination about, and this, and the nature of his relationship with the defendant, could be an area of fraud for cross-examination. Because the court records are not, these court records, I would suggest, are not in the care, custody, and control of the Commonwealth. Procedurally, we have filed the motion as a Rule 17 motion asking for access to the records just for this defendant during the course of the trial.
I mean, you're not looking for the name of the priest who went back there, are you?
Father Bob.
What, I mean, I understand. I'm just trying to figure out what the scope of this is. I understand the request for Dr. Zeisel's amount of visits, because he's slated to possibly be a witness. So I understand that how that might be relevant.
Right.
The priest,
well,
I'm struggling with.
At this point, Your Honor, we haven't been furnished with exactly who defense is going to be calling as witnesses in their case. We have an idea from a witness list that was filed that keeps evolving as the trial progresses. So we don't know, for instance, if that person for some reason has a relationship to the defendant and he wishes to call her for some, or call him for some reason. So with the exception of, again, the nurses, we don't necessarily need their information. We know the purpose for why they're there and that they don't have a role in this case. But anyone else who has been permitted back there that is outside the medical staff, I would suggest the Commonwealth is entitled to at least know, and whether we are able to use that information if it becomes more apparent when the defense was underway with their case, that would come to, that we'd have to wait and see if that's the case. But certainly the fact that counsel has announced Dr. Zeisel as a testifying witness, that's information we believe we're entitled to.
All right, Ms. Reddington?
First of all, here's the list. They want the list. We don't need a Rule 17 and a court order. They can just go over from there to there and get the list and see who's been going in and out to see Lindsay. I don't have a problem with that by no means whatsoever. Father Bob is a Roman Catholic priest who baptized these kids, who is very, very close to Lindsay. Not in a religious sense. They just like each other. She went to Mass sporadically. She's not a devout Catholic. She's a Catholic. She has a relationship with the Father.
Oh, come on.
I haven't even talked to the guy since last week. First time I ever met him. Shook his hand. Nice man. After that debacle yesterday that we went through with the public,
let's stay focused on.
I am staying focused.
Well,
this is what I'm dealing with.
I guess I'll tell you right now, so I can save you. I'm not ordering the name or address of anyone other than Dr. Zeisel.
Can I call him as a witness right now?
Cool. No, I'm gonna allow that so the Commonwealth can take a look at that record. Nobody else though. And then at some point, if the doctor is called, we may need if we have to address that, we can address it. So I'm going to allow the Commonwealth to have the information regarding Dr. Zeisel, and that's it though. Anyone else who went back there has been admitted pursuant to the appropriate rules of the security department in this case. Especially, I'm not ordering the name, address, or frequency of this Roman Catholic priest. I'm just not going to do it based on the record that I have now. If for some reason he's called as a witness, which I haven't seen that, I haven't seen an expectation, even regards that. If that comes up, then the Commonwealth can renew this and I may reevaluate. But right now, the Commonwealth's motion regarding security logs is allowed as to Dr. Paul Zeisel only. All right. Anything else we need to address before Monday? Commonwealth?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Reddington?
No, thank you.
All right. So we'll see everybody on Monday. Thank you.
Court, all rise.
She shouldn't be getting any kind of special treatment, which I can understand what they're doing, but yeah. She can't stand. All right, back to this.
Its emerald necklace. The man whose entire philosophy rested on the belief that designed natural spaces could restore something essential in the human spirit. Olmsted was not hired to build. He was hired to look and to choose. In 1872, he submitted his report to the trustees. His recommendation was 107 acres of wooded land on Wellington Hill in Belmont, a site of long curves and easy slopes, well-grown trees that could be thinned into glades and walks, a landscape that would, in his words, afford what was chiefly wanted better than any other available property in the suburbs of Boston. But Olmsted did not stop at the land itself. He had a philosophy about what should be built on it. He argued against the prevailing model of the era, the single massive institutional building, the kind of structure that announced from a distance exactly what it was. Instead, he called for village-like groupings of cottages, smaller residential buildings scattered across the landscape, so that the campus would read as a community rather than an institution. Something closer to a college, he said, than a hospital. The trustees agreed. They purchased the Belmont land in
I'll have to look into that.
1875, and then quietly, they moved on without him. When construction finally began in 1892, it was Joseph Curtis who was on the ground, shaping the paths and placing the buildings, supervising the work that would give the new McLean its physical form. Olmsted was not brought back. His vision had been adopted in spirit, but the hands that built it were not his. On the 1st of October, 1895, exactly 77 years to the day from the opening of the original Charlestown Asylum, the new McLean Hospital received its first patients. What they arrived to was extraordinary. Cottage residences that bore no resemblance to a ward, sitting rooms with fireplaces, servants' quarters, private grounds. The wealthiest patients lived in conditions that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, the comfort of their own homes. There were excursions to the Boston Athenaeum, rows on the Charles River, afternoons of quiet and beauty in a landscape that had been deliberately arranged to soothe. At its most generous, it was exactly what Olmsted had envisioned. Nature as medicine, beauty as therapy, dignity restored through the quality of one's surroundings. And then there is the final detail, the one that no screenwriter could have invented, the one that history delivered with the precision of a closing argument. Frederick Law Olmsted, in the last years of his life, lost his mind. The deterioration was gradual, then total. His family could no longer care for him. And so, they brought him to McLean, to the land he had chosen, to the institution he had helped imagine.
But his knife, his sheath, the sheath of the knife was in the house with his DNA on it, was it not? Wasn't that how he did it? I mean, wasn't that how they determined he was in the house?
To the grounds that other hands had shaped without him. He arrived as a patient. He looked around at the cottages, the paths, the careful arrangement of trees and walks. And he reportedly said, "They didn't follow my plans. Confound them."
Grace?
The man who had argued for beauty as healing spent his final days inside the place he had sent others. He had chosen this land for the broken-minded. He had not chosen it for himself. But in the end, McLean made that choice for him. Chapter 3, When Wealth Became a Diagnosis.
Didn't they say though that he was in the house prior, or wasn't he like, because their house was open, wasn't it like a basically a party house? The DNA was whatever matched and what didn't. They tweaked. See, he's crazy to have taken or pled guilty then. Why did he plead then?
In 1958, a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet named Robert Lowell checked himself into McLean Hospital for the first of what would become 4 stays across 8 years. He was one of the most celebrated writers in America. He was also, by any clinical measure, seriously ill, cycling through episodes of mania and depression that had marked his entire adult life. McLean knew him well, and he, in turn, came to know McLean with the particular intimacy of a man who keeps returning to the same complicated place. During that first stay, he wrote a poem called Waking in the Blue. It is set inside McLean's walls, among the patients he found himself living alongside. The old New England families, the Brahmin heirs,
Yeah, me
the
too.
men whose names appeared on the sides of buildings and the spines of
We were just talking about that yesterday, about false confessions and how the read technique causes people to do false confessions.
genealogies, now shuffling the corridors in hospital-issued clothing, their fortunes intact, their minds unraveling. Lowell looked at them, and he named them. He called them the Mayflower Screwballs. It was a sardonic phrase. It was also an exact one. Because McLean, by the middle of the 20th century, had become something that its founders almost certainly never intended, and its administrators would never say aloud. A repository for the inconvenient. A place where the great families of New England could deposit a troubled relative with the same quiet efficiency they might use to manage any other embarrassing piece of business. No scandal, no public spectacle, nor any awkward explanations at the club or the church or the dinner table. The machinery of it was elegant in its simplicity. A family faced with a relative whose behavior had become a problem, an heir whose eccentricities had crossed some invisible line, a daughter whose emotional intensity made her unsuitable for the life that had been arranged for her, a son whose mind moved so fast and so strangely that polite society could no longer absorb him. That family had options: the right physician, the right conversation, the right signature on the right form. McLean's gates would open. The problem would be absorbed. Life would continue. 2 of Ralph Waldo Emerson's brothers spent portions of their lives inside these walls. Think about that for a moment. The man who gave America its philosophy of self-reliance, who wrote about the limitless potential of the individual mind, whose essays on nature and transcendence shaped a generation. The Emersons were not unusual in this. They were typical. The pattern repeated itself across generations, behind closed doors, in the language of concern and care. And then there was Upham Memorial Hall. Upham was the crown jewel of McLean's residential buildings. A brick mansion of extraordinary scale, built to house just 9 patients, so grand it resembled a private hotel more than a ward. Its corner suites were said, at one point, to be occupied exclusively by graduates of Harvard College, which led to its informal name among those who knew McLean well, the Harvard Club. It was, in its heyday, an almost satirical monument to the intersection of wealth and madness in American life. By the 1950s and 60s, Upham had become something darker. It was described by those familiar with it as a warehouse,
Oh, wow.
a repository for the chronically ill and elderly rich, men whose families had struck lifetime financial arrangements with the hospital. The terms were simple and devastating: a lump sum, a guaranteed bed, a permanent arrangement. The family's obligation in practice was discharged. There was little incentive for the institution to pursue recovery for these patients. Their families had paid good money, as one account put it, never to see them again. They never did. The gender dimension of all this deserves to be named plainly. Women arrived at McLean's gates in disproportionate numbers, and the justifications offered for their admission were often less medical than social. Unconventional intellectual ambition, emotional intensity that exceeded what a family or a husband found comfortable, a refusal to conform to the life that had been laid out. These were not diagnoses. They were verdicts, social verdicts, handed down by people with the money and the connections to make them stick. The paperwork called it illness. The reality was frequently something more like inconvenience. Robert Lowell understood this. He was, after all, on both sides of it. A man who genuinely needed help, living among men who had simply been filed away. From that vantage point, inside the blue-walled corridors of McLean, he posed a question that the institution could never quite answer. Was this care, or was this erasure? Chapter 4. The Laboratory of Suffering. In 1888, McLean Hospital did something no psychiatric institution in America had ever done before. It established a dedicated research laboratory, a place where scientists would study the biological roots of mental illness, where the tools of chemistry and pathology would be turned toward understanding what actually happened inside a
Yeah, a lot of people with dementia get violent.
suffering mind. It was a genuinely radical act, a declaration that madness was not a moral failing or a spiritual wound, but a medical problem.
Yep.
And that medical problems, given enough intelligence and enough rigor, could be solved. The declaration was sincere. The solutions, however, were another matter entirely, because running alongside McLean's genuine scientific ambition was a history of treatment so damaging, so misguided, so marked by the particular confidence of people who were certain they were helping, that the distance between the research laboratory and the torture chamber was, at certain moments, uncomfortably small. To understand how that happened, it helps to start not with a procedure, but with a person. In 1924, a man named Dr. Horace Frink was admitted to McLean in a state of profound collapse. Frink was not an ordinary patient. He had been a founding member of the New York Psychoanalytic Society in 1911. He had traveled to Vienna to be analyzed by Freud himself. He was one of the most prominent figures in American psychoanalysis, a man who had built his life and his identity on the promise that the talking cure could reach into the deepest chambers of the human mind and set something right. What brought him to McLean was, in part, Freud. Freud had encouraged Frink to pursue an affair with one of his own patients, a wealthy married woman named Madame Bijour. The encouragement was not purely therapeutic. Freud wrote to Frink with language that later scholars found difficult to interpret as anything other than financial. He suggested that Frink harbored a fantasy of making Freud a rich man, and that if matters turned out well, the imaginary gift might be converted into a real contribution to the psychoanalytic fund. The husband of Madame Bijour threatened scandal. He died before that scandal could erupt. Frink married her. The marriage fell apart. Frink's second suicide attempt followed. He ended up at McLean, where the treatment he received was old-fashioned, non-Freudian, and grounded in the kind of structured institutional care that Pinnell might have recognized. Within 5 months, he had recovered sufficiently to leave. The institution he had dismissed as hopelessly behind the times had done what the movement he helped build could not. The case of Carl Liebman in the 1930s is stranger still. Liebman had spent years moving from analyst to analyst, convinced that he was being followed by detectives. Every analyst he saw noted the delusion. None of them could touch it. He was eventually admitted to McLean, where a letter arrived from his sister, explaining the family's situation. She wrote that ever since Liebman had left Vienna, the family, deeply worried about his mental state, had hired detectives to follow him. He knew nothing of this. The paranoia was real, so were the detectives. Liebman never recovered. He lived out the rest of his life inside McLean's comfortable walls. A man whose central delusion had turned out to be true in a system that had no framework for that particular form of tragedy. These were the human realities behind McLean's search for a cure. And the search itself, across these decades, produced instruments of treatment that ranged from the merely ineffective to the genuinely harrowing. In the early years, McLean purchased a version of Dr. Benjamin Rush's tranquilizing chair, a restraint device developed by the Philadelphia physician who believed madness was rooted in the blood and could be disciplined out of the body. 17 different forms of hydrotherapy were practiced: emetics, tincture of opium. The body was the target because the mind remained unreachable by any other means. Then came insulin shock therapy. Patients were injected with doses of insulin large enough to drop their blood sugar into unconsciousness. A coma induced deliberately, repeatedly, over weeks at a time. The theory was that this biochemical reset might restore something in the brain that illness had disordered. For the patients who underwent it, the experience was closer to dying and, returning with no guarantee of what either would feel like. The therapy was eventually discredited entirely. Electroshock treatment followed its own arc, its lineage stretching back to the 1st century, when the Roman physician Scribonius Largus recorded using torpedo fish, electric rays, applied to the scalp to treat headaches and pain. In its modern form, it was more controlled but far from gentle, and administered at McLean, as elsewhere, to patients who had little say in whether it happened. And then there was the lobotomy. The
Lobotomy.
procedure had been pioneered in Europe and awarded a Nobel Prize in 1949, a detail that should give anyone pause about the relationship between institutional prestige and genuine understanding. In America, a barnstorming surgeon traveled the country performing thousands of lobotomies, often without proper anesthesia, with a confidence that history would judge harshly. McLean was not immune. In 1947, 7% of McLean's patients were lobotomized. Every single one of them was a woman, with surgical fees running as high as $600 per operation. One medical historian observed that psychosurgery had become, in that era, a lucrative side specialty. The science pointed one direction. The money pointed the same way. The patients had no map at all. By mid-century, a new force was reshaping American psychiatry, one that promised to replace all of this with something more humane, more sophisticated, more truly healing. Psychoanalysis had arrived, and McLean, after years of resistance, was about to be swept up in the tide. The consequences of that flood are what the next chapter of this story is about. Chapter 5: McLean's Famous Patients. In the summer of 1953, a 20-year-old student from Smith College crawled into the space beneath her family's porch in Wellesley, Massachusetts, swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills, and waited to die. Her name was Sylvia Plath. And for nearly 2 days, while her family searched and neighbors combed the surrounding streets, she lay there in the dark, in what she would later describe as a whirling blackness she genuinely believed was the eternal oblivion. When they finally found her, she was still alive, barely. After emergency treatment, she was transferred to McLean Hospital in Belmont. She would stay for 4 months. She received modified insulin treatment. She underwent a second course of electroconvulsive therapy. She had sessions of psychotherapy with a physician who helped her explore, in careful increments, the landscape of her own interior life. And she recovered, well enough to leave, well enough to return to her studies, well enough to graduate, to win a Fulbright scholarship, to go to Cambridge, to marry, to have children, to write. The treatments McLean offered her in 1953 were, by the standards of that era, among the best available anywhere in the country. That is not a small thing. It is also not the whole story. Because 10 years later, in a flat in London on a February morning in 1963, Sylvia Plath put her head in a gas oven while her children slept in the next room. The best available treatments of 1953 had given her a decade. They had not given her a way to live inside her own mind without being destroyed by it. She was 30 years old. Her novel, The Bell Jar, published just weeks before her death, drew directly on her time at McLean. The fictionalized version of the hospital she created entered the American literary imagination and never left. McLean had saved her life. She had repaid it with a portrait that asked uncomfortable questions about what saving a life actually meant. Robert Lowell was already a McLean veteran by the time Plath arrived. He had been coming and going for years, 4 stays across 8 years in total, each one prompted by the manic episodes that would overtake him without warning and recede, eventually without explanation. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He was also a man who could not always tell the difference between inspiration and the edge of the cliff. His poem, Waking in the Blue, written during his first McLean stay, was set in these very corridors, among the Mayflower screwballs, the Harvard men in their hospital gowns, the old money reduced to its most essential and most helpless form. Lowell was simultaneously McLean's most clear-eyed critic and one of its most faithful returning residents. He knew exactly what the place was, and yet he kept coming back anyway. In April of 1959, a mathematician named John Nash was admitted to McLean by colleagues from MIT who recognized that something had gone catastrophically wrong with one of the most extraordinary minds they had ever encountered. Nash had begun to believe he was receiving messages from extraterrestrial forces. He had tried to surrender his American passport to foreign embassies.
Oh, wow.
He was, by any clinical measure, in the grip of a severe psychotic break. At McLean, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and treated with antipsychotic medication, not insulin shock therapy, which he would experience only later, at a different institution entirely. He responded to treatment. His acute symptoms receded within weeks. He stayed for roughly 50 days, then was released. James Taylor arrived at McLean's gates in the final months of 1965. He was 17 years old. He had been sleeping 20 hours a day. His grades had collapsed, and his parents, alarmed and out of options, arranged his admission after he was assessed as suicidal. Taylor would spend 9 months inside these walls, long enough to complete his high school diploma through McLean's affiliated Arlington School, long enough to begin writing the songs that would eventually make him one of the most beloved musicians of his generation. Knocking Round the Zoo was written here, about this place, about the particular texture of life inside a locked ward when you are 17 and the world outside has become impossible. But the most extraordinary McLean story James Taylor carries is not about music. It is about a draft board. When Taylor turned 18, he was still a patient at McLean. The Vietnam War was escalating, and young men of 18 were being called to register for the Selective Service. Taylor was summoned. A staff member and a nurse escorted him to the draft registration office in Cambridge, both of them in white coats, flanking him on either side. They told the draft board with complete seriousness, "James here is a mental patient. He is a good kid, but he is really not well." He was deferred within seconds. McLean had given James Taylor structure when he had none, a diploma when school had become impossible, the beginnings of a musical identity, and an alibi
I agree.
from a war that killed 58,000 Americans. It is difficult to calculate what those 9 months were worth. Ray Charles came to McLean under entirely different circumstances. There was no breakdown. There was no family intervention. There was a federal judge. In 1964, Charles was arrested at Logan Airport in Boston for possession of heroin and marijuana, his third drug arrest. He faced the serious possibility of prison, but the judge who heard his case took a different view. He offered Charles a deal: 4 years of probation on the condition that he check into McLean every 6 months for observation and that he test clean for drugs at each visit. Charles accepted. He found in Upham's ground floor living room an upright piano. He sat down and played. His fellow residents gathered. He gave impromptu concerts in one of the most unlikely venues of his career and described the experience in his autobiography with the dry economy of a man who had seen everything and was surprised by very little. He walked in through a judge's order and walked out each time into the life that was waiting for him. Chapter 6: The Cracking of the Cage. Every institution, no matter how beautiful its grounds or how prestigious its name, eventually reveals what it is made of. For McLean, the revealing came slowly, not in a single catastrophic moment, but in a series of fractures, each one exposing something that...
Oh, I would have to believe that there's a lot. It's no different than, like, when the nurse, so I think it was yesterday, one of the psychiatrists suggested that she had bipolar or bipolar 2. And Patrick said, "My wife doesn't have bipolar." What if she does? So maybe that was the problem.
Manicured exterior had been carefully arranged to hide. The first crack appeared in the 1940s. A sexual scandal involving a staff member and a patient sent a tremor through the institution. It was not merely the act itself that damaged McLean. It was what the act revealed, that the power imbalances embedded in the relationship between keeper and kept, between the person holding the keys and the person who needed them, were not being managed. They were being exploited.
Yeah.
The scandal drew scrutiny from outside the gates for the first time in a long while, and inside them, morale collapsed in the way that morale always collapses when people...
Well, yeah. And if they're not mentally stable, how can they consent?
realized that the place they work has been lying to itself. By mid-century, McLean had settled into something that was neither healing nor quite failing, a kind of gilded drift, comfortable, prestigious, and expensive, but not, by any honest assessment, especially effective. The institution had become so accustomed to its own reputation that it had stopped interrogating it. A line attributed to the director of that era captured the mood with an accidental precision that bordered on self-parody. "If you don't know where you are," he reportedly said, "then you're in the right place." It was, depending on how you heard it, either a wry joke or an admission. In 1955, the trustees decided that what McLean needed was a transformation. They hired Dr. Alfred Stanton, a prominent Freudian, co-author of the influential text, The Mental Hospital, a man of considerable intellectual standing in mid-century American psychiatry. Stanton arrived with a conviction that was, in its way, as sincere as it was catastrophic. He believed that psychoanalysis could heal schizophrenia, not manage it, heal it. And he believed, with equal conviction, that medication was a crutch, a shortcut, a betrayal of what genuine psychiatry was supposed to do. As one colleague recalled his position, "If you were really a good psychiatrist, you would try to cure without drugs." Across the 1960s, the consequences of that conviction accumulated. Patients with serious psychiatric illness went undertreated or untreated entirely. The decade produced 2 documented crisis periods of patient suicides at McLean.
Oh.
Each one was a tragedy in itself. Together, they were an indictment. Stanton resigned as psychiatrist-in-chief in 1967, and then he did something that, in its own way, is the most remarkable part of his story. He spent the next 15 years shepherding a comprehensive, rigorously designed research study, the kind of study that can only be built by someone who has committed their professional life to a question and refuses to look away from the answer. The study was published in 1985. Its conclusion was unambiguous. Psychoanalysis could not help schizophrenia. The talking cure, applied to the most severe forms of psychotic illness, produced no meaningful benefit. The governing idea of Alfred Stanton's entire tenure at McLean, the belief that had shaped the institution's identity for 30 years, that had kept medication out of the hands of patients who desperately needed it, was wrong. He had spent the rest of his career proving it. The 1985 study did not only close a chapter, it helped open a new one. The era of psychopharmacology was already underway, and Stanton's findings gave it additional momentum. The drug-based approach that he had resisted, that he had characterized as a failure of ambition and craft, became the foundation of modern psychiatric treatment. McLean was not well positioned for the world that followed. The finances told the story plainly. Across the 1990s, the institution faced losses substantial enough to force a reckoning that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. The trustees approved the sale of 80% of McLean's land, the pastoral paradise that Olmsted had identified, that Curtis had shaped, that generations of Boston's elite had paid extraordinary sums to access. That landscape was carved up, parceled out, and sold. The grounds shrank. The campus that had been designed to feel boundless suddenly had very visible edges. What remained was reorganized around research, genuine, rigorous psychiatric science that McLean continues to produce to this day. And alongside that reorganization, something else appeared. A new ward called the Pavilion opened its doors to offer a high-end clinical experience for patients of significant means. A luxury ward for the ultra-wealthy.
Oh, wow.
At McLean Hospital. It was not a departure from McLean's identity. It was a continuation of it. Chapter 7. The Haunting That Remains.
I'll be right back.
The lawns are still immaculate. The oaks still stand along the paths. The brick cottages still sit among the trees with the quiet, settled authority of buildings that have absorbed more human experience than they will ever be asked to account for. If you walked onto the McLean campus in Belmont today without knowing its history, you might still mistake it for a university, a place of learning, of reflection, of minds at work in pleasant surroundings. You would not be entirely wrong. McLean today is a genuine leader in psychiatric research, affiliated with Harvard Medical School and Mass General Brigham, home to one of the largest neuroscientific research programs of any private hospital in the world. The Harvard Brain Tissue Resource Center operates here, the largest collection of its kind on Earth. Neuroimaging technology scans the living brain in ways that the physicians of 1818 could not have conceived. Treatment programs for borderline personality disorder, developed at McLean, have been adopted across the country and around the world. Real science, real progress. Conducted on the same grounds, in the shadow of the same trees, where real harm was done in the name of the same goals. Both things are true. The cultural afterlife of this place is built almost entirely on the testimony of those who suffered inside it. Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, Susanna Kazan's Girl Interrupted, which became a film, which brought McLean's particular atmosphere of beautiful confinement to a new generation of viewers. James Taylor's music, carrying inside it the fingerprints of 9 months spent inside a locked ward at 17. These works did not make McLean famous.
Oh, Girl Interrupted with Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder is about McLean. That's crazy.
McLean made these works necessary. The institution gave its most articulate patients something to push against, and they pushed back with the only instruments they had, language and music, and the long memory of those who survive. Here is the paradox, stated as plainly as it deserves to be stated. McLean was founded on one of the most radical acts of compassion in the history of American medicine, the belief that the broken-minded deserved beauty, dignity, and genuine care rather than chains and dungeons. That belief was real, the people who held it were sincere, and the institution that grew from it became, across the following 2 centuries, one of the most sophisticated instruments of social control that American wealth and privilege ever produced. A place where families deposited their inconvenient members, where women were diagnosed with their own ambitions, where the price of admission guaranteed not recovery, but discretion. Both of those things are the same institution. Neither cancels the other. That is precisely what makes McLean's story so difficult to look away from. Picture them, one last time, inside these walls. Sylvia Plath, at a desk in her cottage, writing in the margins of whatever she was given, finding in the act of writing the only ground that held steady beneath her. Robert Lowell pacing the corridors in the blue hours of the morning, turning a phrase in his mind that would outlast every other thing about him. James Taylor, with a guitar he had somehow gotten his hands on, finding the first notes of something that would eventually reach tens of millions of people who had never heard of Belmont, Massachusetts, or the locked ward where it began. John Nash at a window, looking out at the wooded hills, watching a thought arrive that he could not yet determine was mathematics or madness, and not yet knowing that the answer might be both. They came here broken, or were brought here broken, or were defined as broken by people who found them inconvenient. Some of them left. Some of them returned. Some of them never fully left at all. McLean did not break these people. The world had already done that, in the ways that the world has always broken those whose minds move differently, feel more intensely, or refuse to conform to the shape of the life that has been arranged for them. What McLean offered was a beautiful place to be broken in, and sometimes, not always, not even often enough, a way back out.
So that's where she stayed for 5 days and then left. Crazy. I just wanted to add that since we had to cut court early. Anyway, well, there is no court tomorrow. There will only be court on starting Monday, 9 a.m. Yeah, she stayed in McLean for 5 days. She was supposed to stay longer, but she had to go home due to her daughter's birthday. But she was, she could sign herself out because she was she volunteered to go in. She only stayed for 5 days. So. Well, that's the question, because they both disagreed with the bipolar diagnosis or bipolar 2. And it was something that they were kind of throwing around, but she wouldn't stay on the medication long enough. She would take a day, then be upset about it. She would take one for 4 days, be upset about it. I don't know. He worked from home on the computer since October. So I don't know. He's a business application sales executive at Microsoft. Specializes in enterprise software solutions. So, such as Microsoft Business Applications, Dynamic ERP and CRM, Power Platforms, automation, and artificial intelligence. So that's what he does. So he was able to do that from home and still couldn't help her with the kids and stuff, I guess. Because he was so disconnected from his life. Like, he didn't know anything, didn't know the notebook between her and the nanny, didn't know like anything. It was weird. But anyway, it's very odd. So there's a lot of theories going around. But either way, in all of it, no matter what, no matter about the medication, no matter about all the shit, because you have to think about, she called him in the middle of it. She called him back. I don't care if she's going through all this shit. She called him in the middle of it. So you can't be out of your mind, not realizing what's reality and what's not and all that. Call him in the middle of it, have a conversation with him, and then continue to do what you're doing. And all that, in the end, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, it doesn't give you the right, doesn't give you the leeway to kill your children. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's how I feel too. Like, it goes back to my whole thing about, well, who leaves children alone with somebody who says they have thoughts of it? So he's just much to blame. I agree. So anyway, I'm going to get off here. I will see you all Monday since there's no court tomorrow. So have a good weekend. Thank you all for joining me. This trial is such a shit show. So I appreciate everybody joining, all the subs, everybody that returns, everybody that stays, everybody that is sticking through this with me. But I will see you Monday at 9 a.m. Someone who doesn't care, one thing I want to know is if the prosecutors wanted to pursue charges on him. Me too. Thanks for the stream. You have a good day too. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your time. Hug your family. Tell everybody you love them. Hug your babies. Hug your dogs. I know you got dogs. So anyway, thanks for joining. Until next time.
Man, club just a system, but the deck's set to fail. You speak for transparency, they call it a crime. Next day, you suspended for 6 months of your time. Pedigree, politics, trophies on the wall. Vanity awards while the ethics take a fall. They say it's for the free, but we know what it is. Power in the clubhouse, silence in the pit. Pedigree, politics, ribbons and lies. Smiles at the banquet, but the truth in disguise. You can muzzle the voice, but the truth don't quit. Dog show, kingdom built on counterfeit grit.